tonight. Horror details in the latest sexual abuse lawsuit filed against former priest and Boy Scout master Father Louis Briard. This latest case describes a rape so violent that it might be hard for some people to stomach. But the Boy Scout is moving forward and seeking dismissal of the cases, even with a confession from the disgraced priest. Here's more. It's perhaps the most disturbing and frightening one yet. A lawsuit filed against the Archdiocese of Agana and Boy Scouts of America revealing the horror details of how a minor was repeatedly raped while he was tied up to a tree back in the 1970s. The lawsuit was filed by a man with the initials BJ, who's now 57 years old. BJ says in his lawsuit that he first met Briard when he was 11 or 12 years old. BJ was not an altar server or a member of the Boy Scouts, but he says that Briard often picked up BJ and his friends in Chalampago and offered them free swimming lessons at the L'Enfant River. This became routine, but BJ says on one particular occasion, while walking alone in his village, Briard picked him up and took him to the L'Enfant River by himself. Under the pretense of teaching BJ survival skills to prepare him for when he joins the military, BJ says Briard tied him up against a tree and told him he would teach him how to rescue a prisoner. Instead, while still tied up to a tree, BJ says Briard repeatedly sexually assaulted, sodomized, and raped him. In his complaint, BJ says he begged Briard to stop, screaming in pain from bleeding, and even told Briard, quote, "Stop, I think I'm dying," end quote. At one point, BJ says in court papers that he became exhausted and felt weak from the repeated abuse. After Briard was finished, BJ says Briard paid him $3, dropped him off to a local store, and told him not to hesitate to ask him for anything, whether it's money, food, or clothes. Meanwhile, attorney Patrick Seville, who represents the Boy Scouts, appeared in district court today for a hearing on a handful of the cases filed so far, during which he revealed that the Boy Scouts is seeking dismissal in at least one of the cases filed against them.
No, cannot comment right now.
But it's been filed.
It's been filed, this morning.
At the crux of the Boy Scouts argument is the ambiguity in the law that lifts the statute of limitations for civil claims of sexual abuse indefinitely, as well as constitutional violations within the law. The motion points out that an organization can speak for itself only through its employees, quote, most, if not all of whom will be dead or gone 40 to 60 years later, end quote. But for an organization like the Boy Scouts, which is volunteer-led and locally organized, they would be less likely to keep extensive records to substantiate such claims of abuse. The Boy Scouts also argue that the legislature was not clear in its intent in passing the law as to the retroactivity of the law. The only clarity that could be discerned in the legislation was to remove any legal challenges from a previous bill that only lifted the statute for 2 years, as well as to, quote, finally make it possible for those child sex abuse survivors to seek justice against their victimizers, end quote. In court today, U.S. Magistrate Judge Joaquin Manabusin gave attorney David Lujan, who represents all sex abuse plaintiffs in federal court, until June 2nd to prove jurisdiction. The judge also ordered that any similar cases filed after June 2nd must include diversity jurisdiction. In the meantime, the lawsuits are still held in abeyance until Judge Manabusin can determine diversity jurisdiction. The next hearing for the parties is June 8 at 11 a.m.